As a kid growing up, I longed for more of something called love. The problem was I didn't know what kind I wanted or needed. At age 10, I had my first volunteer job shelving books in the library, and one day I had to walk around with this little paperback book that didn't seem to have a code to go on any of the shelves. Instead, it was on this rotating wire rack that was like practically outside the front door. It was a Harlequin romance. Now, in this era of banning all kinds of books, I think about those worn books in that rotating rack and how much more dangerous they were for me than the books which affirm a person's racial or gender identity or sexual orientation. Not only were they toxically anti-feminist, they were also located right there by the front door. I've really wondered about that since then, and I'm not sure it was because the librarians wanted to signal that, they really aren't in the library, or if they were making them just easier to find. I just never could figure that out. But I took one home one day, to the horror of my very degreed parents, who informed me that people like us did not read books like that. Well, that was enough for me. A couple of those battered books were always buried at the bottom of my library book bag from then on. Yet in my hunger, I became kind of addicted, to be truthful, and I began, actually looking for love in all the wrong places, specifically in places under 200 pages with a predictable cookie-cutter plot in which the woman was made whole by being taken care of by a man. Yes. Now today, in 2023, many of us are looking for love, and it's a serious thing. And some of us don't even know where those places are where we can find it. And maybe many of us still think of love in that narrow view that would get me into trouble time and time again throughout my life. It was a kind of love which centered just one kind of relationship rather than a love which was centered across the whole entirety of our lives. A love which could be like a lens on the world, a love that was large enough to be a sanctuary, too armed enough to be an embrace. And I could spend a lot of sermons listing all the reasons why we need that kind of larger embracing love today. We live in a time when uncertainty sneaks up on us almost every day, when hatred has been let loose, perhaps because of leaders that want to project it, and also perhaps because we're living with a lot of fear about things that we don't know how to control, and hate is an awfully good distraction. Whatever the reason is that it's working right now, love has become almost countercultural, and we need that big, multi-armed, multi-person commitment and struggle, and that is the kind of love that we seek to center here. Theorist and writer Bell Hooks writes, "To me, all the work I do is built on a foundation of loving kindness. Love illuminates matters, and when I write provocative social, cultural criticism that causes readers to stretch their minds, to think beyond set paradigms, I think of that work as love in action, while it may challenge, disturb, and at times even frighten or enrage readers," she says. Love is always the place where I begin and end. Now consider, as we did in our Time for All Ages, all those little forms of love, the little ones, the little acts that make a big difference, the people who pick up that extra carton of broth for their sick neighbor, who drop a line to an old friend so that they know someone is thinking of them, who are willing to give someone a ride somewhere they really need to go for their sanity and soul, who work on themselves so their children can live with more ease, the ones committed to being more mindful so they're less likely to strike out at others randomly, those who visit someone who's sick or down, who talk to someone who's lonely, who provide a home for an animal, who bring a meal to the new parents, who buy a sandwich for the houseless elder, the people who sing a song to someone who is ill or dying, who take whatever moment is offered them always to affirm that somebody matters. On the days when the world overwhelms us, one of those little acts of love can be a lifeline. So here's the thing. As Rodney said so well, centering love is tied into our whole tradition of care and compassion on both our Unitarian and Universalist sides of the family. And though we as a people are far from being immune to the hypocrisy of crafting pretty words rather than living our ideals have not been focused, as Rodney said, around abstract ideas of nature, the nature of an unknowable divinity, or what it means to be pious personally and worthy of personal salvation. Instead of saying, this is what we believe, we've been more often saying, this is what we want to do in the world. We don't quite know how to do it, but we need to do it. Which is sometimes why we need to stop and assess, as the times change, what makes sense for our times now. Now, those who have been crafting statements about what is commonly believed among us, as one of our Unitarian ancestors described our statements of belief, which led us from the 19th to the 20th century, believe that our times require that we center love. They make their case based on what we did in the past, our leaders who promoted education that could follow the curiosity of a child, who called for humane care for the mentally ill when people thought they were just people possessed by demons, those who fought for the rights of women and slaves to affirm the humanity of lesbians and gays, and later bisexual and transgender people, and those who identify as queer or questioning. Again and again, we have pushed out with some effort to widen the circle of embrace, most times with a delay or a partiality we've looked back on with embarrassment later. As our work to include those with disabilities and neurodiversity attest, we're not immune to social pressure. When we see something we need to do and we think it's going to make somebody else around us uncomfortable, maybe it makes us uncomfortable. We hesitate sometimes in that place a little too long. Buddhist teacher and leader Angel Kyoto Williams talks about how it's a function of the powers that would organize us for gain. For those powers subjugate our capacity for collaboration and care. It's under threat to your belonging, to that society that you are commissioned to be complicit with, that othering. To be complicit with that othering. If you are not complicit, then you are threatened to be cast out. And it is deeply human, our need and our desire to belong. This is one of the reasons that love is not easy and it's not a given. It's not squishy. We too have to heed the words of 1 Corinthians. If I speak in the tongues of men and angels, but have not love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but I have not love, I am nothing. Today, in this year, in this time, in this set of conditions, we're being asked to step into the embrace of love and to push the circle of its boundaries outward, to make places like this a sanctuary for those who are under threat because of just who they are, who they love, or their desire for autonomy over their own bodies. To center love when people have bullied people about who they are for so long is really a radical act and an important one in these times. We've needed to do that, just as we have around contemporary forms of racism and other discriminations, new risks to women's lives. This time is asking us how much we are willing to center love, even if it makes us look at things, even if it's easier to be cynical, apathetic, and hateful, because that is the norm. How much are we willing to center love? Especially that Buddhist concept of loving kindness. It always reminds me of the kind of circles you get when you drop a pebble into water, the way they spread out, each one embracing more and more water. We need to remember that path. I will be clear that everyone has their own version of that path. Loving ourselves might be the path that some of us need to be on, because Many of us who have been without the basic necessities of consistent love might need that. Loving ourselves can be the path that allows us to move out to love those who are most essential to us in our survival, and then the people just beyond that, and then those we see in the day-to-day world in another way, like our unhoused neighbors whose routines cross ours on a daily basis now in this area. And then there are the people who make us unhappy or uncomfortable, the people who are promoting the hate. These circles may seem very far away, and yet they are important. This act of sending love is a way of acknowledging our interdependence and all the choices we make to try to ensure that there will be a planet with resources that is habitable. The ability to see one another in the largest embrace of love and not be consumed by the fires, the waters, and all the extremes. As the 13th century Sufi poet Rumi says, love is the work of the tender and the gentle. Love is the work of the wrestlers. About a millennium later, I'm asking, where do you need to center love in your life? Where do you need brave love, strong love, courageous love, and where do you need to wrestle? Bell Hooks says, from childhood into adulthood, we are often taught misguided and false assumptions about the nature of love. Perhaps the most common false assumption about love is that love means we will not be challenged or changed. No doubt this is why people who write about racism, sexism, homophobia, religious abuse, etc., worry and feel that they are challenged. It challenges their set assumptions, and they tend to see that work as harsh rather than loving. Here is the thing, my friends. Love is not facile. It is not easy. I always think about the other part of the Christian scripture, 1 Corinthians, as sort of the anti-Harlequin narrative. And what's really funny to me is it's often used as what I can see as sort of a foreshadowing in wedding services. It speaks to the challenges and wrestles of love. You remember, maybe some of you may know that text. Love is patience, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It will always protect, always trust, always hope, persevere. Love never fails. But when there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. We are living in a time when knowledge can often feel as if it's passing away, and that makes the love more important, doesn't it, to all of us? So here's the thing, if I could go back and tell my lonely, abused 10-year-old self something, I would say this. You're right. Yep, love is the answer, just not that kind of love. Just leave those little books on that weird little rotating shelf that you've been sneaking into your room and reading at night with the flashlight under the covers. It's also not in those other magazines that many of your male-identified classmates were boasting of perusing under the covers when you were that age. I might share another quote from Rumi with that little 10-year-old, this one. Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to see and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. I would say to that girl and to everyone who's still seeking love in this world that there's a love that's bigger than all of that, bigger than ourselves. It's love that is the action verb. It is the love that gives us and others the means to live in this world with some sense of agency and satisfaction. And the people not wondering why the world seems so hard are the ones who already know what people are capable of when there is no foundation of love. Let us not be scornful of love. Let us not think of it as something that is easy, too easy. And maybe for some who have known security all their lives, it seems that way, yet everyone in this room, everyone who's listening across the internet, loves someone who does not have enough love in that world. Because this could include Any child or teen or young adult who's wondering if we'll make the choices together we need to try to slow the climate crisis. So let us all wrestle with this love, the one that is the place where we begin and end, the one that is, for this moment, our answer when ill fortune, which is inevitable, does pry about these doors and about the doors of too many. May we make love our ongoing commitment to treat ourselves and others as if we are all precious. Love thus becomes our ongoing willingness to take into the largest embrace of our lives, the lives of others. It can counter the currency of hate in this world. In that way, let us commit to put love at our center.